Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Work in Progress. This is day 3, and my hope is to settle into a bit of a groove here. I've watched back my first couple of videos and have noticed some things, and I'm not going to bore you with the details of that, but wanted to maybe smooth over some of the rougher patches of how my other videos were coming off. And it's a work in progress, so the title says it all. Today, I want to talk about something a little less urgent, a little less newsworthy, and something more, I guess, in my wheelhouse, and that is what makes a good singer. This is an ongoing debate on social media, on any number of music pages, and on one of the unfortunate Facebook pages that has snagged me as a regular contributor. Someone asked the very disruptive and what is the word, rage baiting question: who's a legendary singer? Or I think it was legendary. I think that was the word they used. Who's a legendary singer who actually can't sing that well? And of course, again, rage bait. This is prompting people to call out, not just any singer, but legends. So it's very directed rage bait, who, despite the fact that they are considered legendary, secretly can't sing, or it's a well kept secret, or it's something that we all gloss over in our evaluations of their musical contributions. So the idea is, who can't really sing? And I was reading the responses and I disagreed with almost all of them because I have a very specific view of what it means to be a good singer. And I was coping, to use a current term that's used in a very different way than its traditional usage, but I was coping pretty well up until they uh, hit a nerve, struck a nerve with someone mentioning Aaliyah and Janet Jackson. Those are two of my very favorite artists. As a matter of fact, if you look over on my, oh, actually, I moved that. Never mind. I have two very specific artifacts in my place here that speak to my opinion of them. I may pull those out at the end of the video, um, but I think that both Janet and Aaliyah are exceptional singers that are unfairly derided by a lot of people because they don't belt, or they don't usually belt. They have been known infrequently through in their discographies to do a little belting, but that is certainly not what they're known for, and it's not their strength by any means. And because they don't do complicated vocal runs, because they don't display that sort of vocal strength that we associate with, that a lot of people associate with great singers. And that struck a nerve, so it started a debate, and it helped me get deeper into, because this person wasn't about ad hominem attacks. Most people are, and I can usually just shut those people down by pointing out that they're being jerks, instead of necessarily needing to defend my point of view on things, because they're not being reasonable. So why would I counter their non-factual retorts to me with facts? It just, they've not even come up with a point for me to refute in most cases. But this person was being reasonable, although in my mind the tone was a bit condescending, and it forced me to kind of articulate what I mean when I say someone is a good singer, and what does anyone mean. And it really strikes at the value of art, like, anywhere or anytime. I did pan over to this inadvertently. I was looking for the other thing, the Janet and Aaliyah things. But if you look over in the corner there, see my highly technical camera work here, tilting my laptop. But if you can see up here right over here, this is a piece of art that is from probably my favorite artist. It's actually an original artwork, and the artist's name was Lebo, or uh, his birth name was David Le Batard. I hope I'm not butchering that pronunciation too much. Um, and that that piece over there went for a fair sum of money. It was, I mean, it's not like I mortgaged my house to buy it or anything, but it is an original artwork, and I have another original of his as well at my house, and a lot of prints, a lot of signed prints of his as well. And so I've spent a fair amount of money on this artist over the years, and if you look at the composition of this piece, I know you can't see a lot of detail there, but for some people, they would pass this over at a thrift store or a home goods store where they sell framed artwork, and it could be marked down on the clearance rack to $10, and they wouldn't even buy it. And I spent quite a bit more than that on it, and it just goes to show the subjectivity of the value of art. And the composition of that piece over there is fairly simple, or I would say almost deceptively simple in some ways, because there are definitely, if you look closer at the details, you see that there's a lot of artistic finesse and a lot of artistic thought that goes into these brushstrokes, but at the same time they're meant to be kind of primitivist in sort of the way that Picasso became famous for doing. And if Picasso had started off doing the stuff from his earlier in his career, it probably wouldn't have been as well received, because everyone knew that Picasso was my hand isn't showing up, was a real artist. He actually could do the more detailed, technically skilled artwork, and he basically pulled that apart over his career, and that was the whole point of it. Like, the simpler you go, the more authentic it is the idea. And with singing, we really are looking at a lot of the same artistic concepts. Is the best singing in the world a highly trained opera singer who trained her voice for decades, or is a child singing a lullaby, which would be maybe the equivalent of a late stage Picasso painting? Is that the ultimate in music? And which one is worth more? Which one qualifies as better singing? And these are the sort of things that most people who listen to pop music aren't really thinking about. I think pop music has been this really cutthroat race to the top, both from an artistic standpoint, a market standpoint, and from a fan standpoint. People who are fans of artists like, say, Mariah Carey or Aretha Franklin, they place a lot of value on the technical skill of their favorite singer's voice, and they will cite that in a heartbeat as proof that they're right about who's a good singer and who's not. But at the end of the day, what is really important? And people value different things. And so I found myself in a discussion with a guy who was saying that Aaliyah's voice was cruise ship worthy at best. And there's a lot to unpack there. Like, that's easy to just take that as an insult. But what is really being said here? I have been on a lot of cruises, and I've heard a lot of singing, and I've heard a lot of actually really good singing. People who make a living singing day in and day out on cruise ships develop really good vocal practices. They're good singers. Simon Cowell has I mean, it's not, he didn't invent the idea of the cruise ship singer or the lounge singer as a trope for mediocre singing, but he certainly sort of blasted it out to tens of millions of people as an insult. to be used to say that a singer was just garden variety in some aspect. There are so many nuances to the human voice, and there are so many different ways of layers of vocal skills and techniques and ways of getting to those places. You can take an infinite number of vocal classes where you can learn techniques like vocal fry and glissandos and or just learning scales and understanding which note is which, so you can understand key changes and you can like navigate melodies by reading it off of a page of sheet music. There's so many layers to uh, the vocal instrument, and then there's people who just sing. Is there inherently more value of one over the other? Not really. Knowing all these technical things gives you a toolkit that you can leverage to perhaps enhance what you're doing. But if someone who just decides they're going to open their mouth and sing and everyone is captivated by it, then that counts too, and that counts just as much. Another thing that the individual that I was debating with said was, well, Aaliyah, I won't get into what he said about Janet because I'm afraid that will send me off on a totally different spiral. But what he said about Aaliyah was that she was well positioned in the industry, and therefore she had a platform to showcase the voice that she had, which, in his opinion, didn't constitute a great singing voice. And my counter to that was Whitney Houston. Well, I didn't say that. This I did not say to him, but my what I'm saying now is that Aaliyah had a platform, but so did Whitney Houston, so did Mariah Carey. You can't use this argument in good faith if you're going to not going to allow it to be applied to other people who had industry connections or got a really big break and made it into the industry. There's not a single singer that we all know popularly who didn't have connections or didn't develop connections at some point, because otherwise they wouldn't have become famous. There's thousands upon thousands of unknown singers who are just as good, and I think that artificial distinction is what really kind of it's to me what really bothers me about these arguments. People refuse to accept that Whitney Houston was anything but divinely appointed to her position in popular culture because her voice was singular and one of a kind. Here's the news flash: everybody's voice is singular and one of a kind. We may treasure the uniqueness of that particular voice over some others, but the truth is everyone has that uniqueness. And that's not to diminish Whitney's obvious vocal gifts, but it is to say that Aaliyah had a very specific vocal gift as well. And for people who are transported somewhere emotionally by listening to her music, it means just as much. And so I really just think that people who are gung-ho about being gatekeepers over who's a good singer and who aren't good singers don't operate in good faith when they're making their arguments. Aaliyah had a platform that she developed through her industry connections. So did Whitney Houston. Aaliyah and Janet had choreography and high-budget music videos to enhance the aesthetic impact of their vocal productions. So did Whitney Houston. The truth is, the experience of listening to a record, putting on a set of headphones or some earbuds, or just being in a room with a good stereo and no other distractions, and just taking in a song, taking in a record, and having someone's voice speak to you and express things to you, that's not something that you can police. And if that's a quirky avant-garde producer sampling a 2-year-old cooing and putting that on a loop artistically, that's sort of like a musical Picasso kind of vocal moment. And if that moves you, then really, and of course this deconstructs the whole idea of what good singing is to a lot of people, but and it's uncomfortable. But so it may help to put the pieces back in place and talk about this in a more structured way. But just know we can go all the way back to that point where we say it doesn't matter what is being sung and how out of tune it is. If it moves you, then that's all that matters. But if you want to re-inject some sort of objective standards of what constitutes musicality, the truth is that a lot of people only value certain aspects of musicality. Whitney Houston, and I'm sorry I keep going, I'm using her as a gold standard. I'm not using her as a whipping post. Whitney Houston, as that gold standard, had certain vocal attributes that made her very popular and made her vocals particularly affecting to a lot of people. And so did Janet, and so did Aaliyah. And people will just sort of reflexively say, well, you can't compare so-and-so to Whitney Houston. That's just crazy. And this is sort of the same line of argument of, well, right is right and wrong is wrong, and I know what's right. And at a certain point, that's where I feel like these arguments land, and that's ultimately where I think my position on what a good singer is really strong. Because when you break it all the way down, the only thing that people have to really say about it is that, well, the way Whitney Houston or the way Aretha Franklin or the way whomever, this vocal icon that you have established as the benchmark of good singing, and anyone who doesn't live up to that is not a good singer, whatever this person is that you set up as this benchmark is completely subjective, because you can't defend your selection at a certain point beyond just being outraged that I don't agree with you. There are so many aspects of musicality that all of these artists that get dumped on, even people like Jennifer Lopez. I am so sick of people using her as a whipping post for bad vocals, because why? Why do you care? If you don't care for the way that she sings, then just don't listen to her. Why do you have to continually go back and, Ashanti was a part of her career for maybe a year or two. So whatever your misgivings about J-Lo, I guarantee you that Ashanti hasn't sung on one of her songs in over 20 years. So we can let that go as your primary reason of, for thinking that she's ever had any sort of success whatsoever as a singer. Anyway, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but it just infuriates me that people are so fixated on these things that they feel like they need to litigate other people's voices. If a person went into a studio and made a record that impacted you, and they were able to channel their personal resources, both what they can do with their voice and the sort of energy they can create in the studio, in many cases interpreting their own lyrics or interpreting someone else's lyrics, and doing all the things that go into making a song, into making a record, and they produce something that when you slip on your headphones and you listen to it, you get lost in it. And they did that through the primary vehicle of their voice, then I say that they're a singer. They're a professional singer. They definitely made money off of the fact that they sung a song and did it in a way that resonated with listeners. And I think that should be the end of the discussion. And being outraged that I don't think that anyone else besides Whitney, Aretha, whomever qualifies as a good vocalist is just like you raging for, raging and gatekeeping for no reason. So I think that pretty much encapsulates my viewpoint on good singing. So I think that's probably all I wanted to say, and I've been rattling on for 20 minutes. So I will wrap this up now, and stay tuned for the next one.